I want to show you this map of a mountain range in southern Montana that's been the backdrop of a decades-long battle for some of the most coveted land in the country. These are the Crazy Mountains, and they sit roughly 100 miles north of Yellowstone National Park in the northern Rocky Mountain region. Land in the Crazies is divided like a chessboard. Some squares are public, some are private, and tensions run the highest along these public trails that often run directly through private property. The private landowners, they've been accused of blocking those trails for decades. So when the Forest Service received an opportunity to do a land swap deal with a group of private landowners in the eastern part of the mountain range, many Montanans hoped that the service would turn it down, but they didn't. Who are these private landowners, really? And why do they seem hell-bent on taking control of a mountain range in Montana? To get to the bottom of how this all started and how it might end, I went all the way back to when Montana was just a U.S. territory and followed a trail that led me through decades of conflict.
This is America. We don't share land here.
This isn't just a story about the Crazies. It's about the fate of a state, emblematic of an even bigger problem coming for the whole of the American West. And the backcountry billionaires who seemingly want to control it.
I feel like Billionaires doesn't do it justice.
So check this out. This is a map of the Crazy Mountains. Looks a lot like a chessboard, right? These green blocks represent all lands owned publicly, while the gray squares in between represent lands owned privately. How this pattern came to be dates all the way back to 1864. Montana wasn't yet a state, but a newly established territory under President Lincoln. To get things going, he granted millions of acres to the Northern Pacific Railroad, but did so in alternating square-mile sections that checkered the land's ownership between the public U.S. government and the private railroad company. This is actually called checkerboarding, but today I'm sticking with the chess analogy. The idea wasn't for the railroad to use the land, but to sell it off and then use that money to finance construction to further develop the West. By the 1940s, the railroad had sold a large portion of its private lands, including some acreage that it owned in the Crazy Mountains, which, by that point, had been declared a national forest. The checkered ownership of the land had created a public access nightmare for the U.S. Forest Service, made even worse by ranchers like Paul L. Van Cleve, who, in the early 1940s, started blocking access to a road that cut through his private dude ranch. That road still exists today and serves as a main access point to the Crazy Mountains. In 1948, the U.S. government sued Van Cleve, based on the fact that the road was established when the land was in part public land of the United States and in part owned privately by the Northern Pacific Railroad Company. So the Forest Service could then argue an easement or a right of access. And with that, the board was set for decades of conflict.
I need you to move across the road, or I'm gonna have to cite you for trespassing.
Tensions remained high throughout the 2010s as the private landowners continued to block trails and cause public access issues for the U.S. Forest Service. But instead of checking the landowners, like it did in the 1940s, around 2015, the U.S. Forest Service considered a land swap deal that would consolidate public lands on the eastern side of the mountain range. In order to do that, 6,100 acres of private land here would become public, whereas 3,800 acres of public land over here would become private. Before we dive even deeper into this deal, it's worth mentioning that conflicts over land ownership and development appear to be on the rise in the western U.S. In California's Lake Tahoe, the fate of a public ski resort is in limbo after its owners announced plans to turn it into a private legacy family club. And in the East San Francisco Bay Area, billionaires have spent roughly $900 million on 60,000 acres of land to build a new city, receiving plenty of backlash from locals.
It just makes me very angry.
But in the case of the Crazies, it's a bit more nuanced, because land exchanges this big aren't like traditional real estate deals.
These deals are expensive and very time-consuming and secretive.
Ben Ryder Howe spent 2 years in pursuit of answers surrounding the Crazy Mountain land exchange.
One of the aspects of the deal that was kept from the public was the cost.
According to his article in New York Magazine, a private party financed the bulk of the transaction costs. And in that party are 900 of the most influential people, including Melinda French Gates and Tom Brady. They call themselves the Yellowstone Club, and they make up the largest concentration of billionaires anywhere outside of Manhattan. Could you be a future member? You're gonna need a $1 billion business idea first. Let me hook you up with our business startup kit. Whether you need help brainstorming a business name, developing a business plan, or pitching your ideas to investors, we've got 9 templates to get you started. Click the link in the description to download the kit. Since it was founded in 1997, the Yellowstone Club has occupied more than 15,000 acres of land in Big Sky, Montana. According to Forbes, becoming a member requires
buying land, a home, or a condo. Even the least expensive undeveloped plot will set you back $10 million. There's $78,000 in annual dues, which cover unlimited skiing and...
Pause it there. Skiing is an important piece of this entire story, and here's why. The Yellowstone Club prides itself on being the world's only private ski and golf community. For years, it's looked for ways to elevate and expand its members-only ski resort offerings, including in 2015, when it approached the Forest Service about obtaining a ridge located on public land near its private resort in Big Sky. In exchange, the club offered the agency some of its own land, but the Forest Service rejected the deal for having limited public benefits. So the club came back with a better deal that would serve a greater public interest and appeal to the Forest Service by solving its decades-long problem of block trails. In this new proposal, the club offered to trade some of its private land in the East Crazy Mountains in order to get that ski ridge in Big Sky. As for the Forest Service, getting that private land in the Crazies would consolidate public land and help temper the conflicts created by Lincoln's chessboard.
The Yellowstone Club has long maintained that they weren't the ones who initiated this whole process. It wasn't our idea. We weren't interested in the Crazy Mountains, We just ended up there by accident, which I don't believe that.
In a request for more answers, a Yellowstone Club representative told us the Forest Service asked that the club get involved in helping address the long-standing conflicts and checkerboard issues in the East Crazies. The Forest Service told us the Yellowstone Club asked them to identify access needs and opportunities for partnership. Regardless of how this deal unfolded, both parties maintained that it was the forest supervisor who identified priority work in the Crazy Mountains. And that's how we went from this to this. The Yellowstone Club appeared to have nothing to gain from swapping land in the Crazies. After all, its end goal was to gain a new expert ski run for its members in Big Sky. But it appears the club's sister company might have had something to gain, in the form of Marlboro Ranch, a dude ranch it purchased in the Crazies for an undisclosed amount in 2021. The company has since rebranded it as a private members-only resort, with fishing, golfing, and of course, skiing. To clarify, the ranch is included in the exchange. It'll give the Forest Service Smeller Lake, which is located down here. But by consolidating public lands up here, some believe the deal will give the Yellowstone Club and its stakeholders greater privacy on the eastern side of the mountain range. Because this deal won't just change the configuration of the public's land. It will create a donut-like ring of private ownership around this new public area.
And the benefit of it is if you build one of these donuts, you don't have to pay taxes on that land on the inside of the donut. You get your own little private park. And that's really what the Crazies have been like for many years. The ranchers built a kind of moat around the Crazies. What this land swap is going to do is it's going to make it harder for the public to access the Crazy Mountains.
On January 17th, 2025, as we were filming this video, the forest supervisor signed the decision to authorize the project. As part of that authorization, the club promises to construct a new trail that will connect existing trails and trailheads, creating a nearly 40-mile public loop around the mountain range. And while that may be what the Forest Service wants,
the new trail has been described as suitable for a mountain goat. It has 17 switchbacks in the first few miles. That's extremely demanding for most hikers. The first campground isn't, I think, until 25 miles along the trail. That's going to make it even harder for people to do this trail.
In response to critics, the Forest Service acknowledged in its memo to us that the new trail will gain elevation more quickly than the old one, but argued that it's been designed to meet the agency's standards for Trail Class 3, which most likely includes some obstacles. If the land's new configuration and trails do end up discouraging the public from visiting the Crazies, then the range would inherently become more private, encouraging more billionaires to buy land. And when you look at it that way, then the heart of this deal is less about conflict resolution and more about control. And that control comes down to privacy. And that privacy might be worth a lot. despite the Yellowstone Club's representative saying it does not expect the deal to increase privacy or land values.
The most valuable commodity in Montana right now is seclusion. These mega landowners want to control what happens on the land adjacent to theirs or upstream of theirs because the value of this land depends on exclusivity. It depends on keeping people out.
Checkmate. Montana may have its fair share of billionaires, but there's an island in Florida nicknamed the Billionaire Bunker. Check out my video on Indian Creek Village, but before you do that, go download our business startup kit and subscribe to the Hustle YouTube channel for more stories like this.